Discuss this further with Matt Saltmarsh. He is the head of news and media for the UN Refugee Agency in the Middle East and North Africa. Matt, pleasure having you on the show. I mean, is this the worst that it's ever been?
Well, it's certainly the worst that we have on record. As an agency, we've been in existence since the early 1950s, and we haven't seen a bigger number than this. And it's sobering and it's quite alarming in many ways. But also, if you look at the state of the world, I suppose it's not a great shock. The numbers of forcibly displaced had been rising in recent years. We have a number of protracted situations. You've mentioned a couple. Afghanistan, Syria are certainly ones to come to mind. But now, of course, in the most recent months, we have the situation in Ukraine. And there, as you mentioned, there's a huge number of internally displaced people, as well as a very significant number of people who have crossed the borders. So when you take that combination of internal displacement and refugees, you come up with this quite staggering number.
You gave the example of the most recent example in Ukraine, where you have millions of people who have been forced to flee their homes, internally displaced people, also people fleeing the country. I want to bring that up. I mean, talk to us about how these people are treated and the differences, because it seems Europe are welcoming these millions of refugees literally with open arms, but the people in other areas like Afghanistan and Syria, there's a much different approach. I mean, how prevalent is this?
Well, I think it's true to say that the welcome and the levels of funding and compassion for the Ukrainian crisis have been quite unprecedented. That could be to do with the scale of the situation. It could also be to do with the fact that there's a lot more attention on it because it's in Europe and it's the situation now. So while that's very welcome, and it's certainly the kind of model that we would have advocated for that situation, it's also true to say that you have a number of refugee situations across the world, primarily in less wealthy countries. And many of those have been lasting for years, if not decades. If you look at Afghanistan, we're well over 4 decades into that crisis now. And perhaps part of the problem is an element of fatigue. When these crises drag on, there's less funding, there's less attention on things. But our message will be very much that everyone has the right to seek asylum, and that we should support all of those people who are forcibly displaced around the world, wherever they are, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Africa, the Middle East, or the rest of the world.
You mentioned that there's a crisis going on for 4 decades. I understand that. Talk to us about, 100 million. That's a huge number. How many of these people actually are able to go back home? They end up back home because it's a difficult situation.
That's right. I mean, the numbers of refugees and internally displaced who have been returning home has been declining in recent years. The last full year that we have data for is 2020. And in terms of internally displaced people, the numbers were just over 3 million. And in terms of refugees, around 250,000. That's people who are able to go home. Unfortunately, those numbers get dwarfed by the numbers who have to flee their homes, whether that's inside the country or whether that's across borders. And one of the things that we're really trying to work on with the international community, with our partners, is looking at solutions. And in terms of return, the only way you can get people to sustainably return home is to establish peace and security and eventually development and prosperity. That's what will keep people from fleeing their homes.
The UNHCR's Matt Saltmarsh, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. I do appreciate having you.